For decades, psychedelics were pretty much relegated to the fringes of society and science. But now, they are making a massive comeback. And for good reason. Researchers are seeing this incredible promise, a whole new frontier in mental health care. So today, we're going to explore the absolutely fascinating science behind how these substances might actually be rewiring our brains on a really deep emotional level.
And that, right there, is the central mystery we're tackling. See, it's not just about the trip itself. It's about lasting, meaningful change. So how do psychedelics actually change the way we feel, day to day? Well, science is just starting to piece this puzzle together. And let me tell you, the answers are turning out to be way more complex and interesting than anyone expected. All right, so researchers are really zeroing in on what are called serotonergic psychedelics. We're talking about things like psilocybin. That's the active compound in magic mushrooms. Now, these are substances that primarily work on the serotonin system in our brains, which, as you probably know, plays a huge role in regulating our mood. And the reason for all this excitement is that they're showing some serious potential in treating a whole range of psychiatric conditions.
That's right. Especially when you look at mood disorders like depression, some of the results have been just incredible. And this has led scientists to a really powerful hypothesis, that the profound effects these substances have on our emotional processing, how we experience and manage our feelings, that might just be the core mechanism driving all this therapeutic power.
But like with any major scientific breakthrough, it is never that simple. The moment researchers started to dig a little deeper, they found that the story of psychedelics and our emotions is, well, it's much more of a puzzle.
And this is where the puzzle gets really tricky. Because when you look at the hard data, the results are kind of all over the map. Some studies show a decrease in negative emotions, but then others don't. The impact on positive feelings is just as inconsistent. So what does that tell us? It suggests we need to look beyond these simple labels of good or bad feelings and start asking a much more sophisticated question.
And that question is all about emotion regulation. Now, this isn't just about what you feel. It's about what you do with that feeling. It's the whole toolkit of strategies, both conscious and unconscious, that we all use to manage our emotional lives. Let's break down a few of the really key ones.
So first up, we've got cognitive reappraisal. Just think of this as mental reframing. It's a super healthy or adaptive strategy where you consciously change how you interpret a situation to alter its emotional punch. So, for example, instead of seeing a job rejection as a total failure, you might reappraise it as an opportunity to find something that's an even better fit. It's flexible and it's really powerful.
Then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have expressive suppression. This is what we'd call a maladaptive or unhealthy strategy. It's that classic bottling it up, consciously hiding what you're feeling and just putting on a brave face. And while, it might seem useful in the moment, it's often linked to way more psychological distress down the line.
And finally, there's rumination. This is another really tough maladaptive strategy where you just get stuck in a repetitive loop, focusing over and over and over again on distressing thoughts and feelings without ever moving forward. It's a huge feature of conditions like depression. It's like being trapped on a negative thought carousel that you just can't get off of.
Okay, so with those key ideas in our back pocket, what happens when you introduce psilocybin into this whole equation? How does it actually affect these specific strategies that we use to manage how we feel? Well, the findings here are truly illuminating.
And what's really fascinating here is that there's no one-size-fits-all answer. The research shows that psilocybin's impact on our emotion regulation is highly personalized. It seems to affect people differently depending on whether they're dealing with a clinical condition like depression or are coming in as healthy individuals.
So this data paints such a fascinating picture. For people with depression, psilocybin significantly decreased that maladaptive rumination. It helped them get off that negative carousel. But in healthy individuals, it didn't really target a negative strategy. Instead, it enhanced their use of that healthy strategy, cognitive reappraisal. And then you look at patients with alcohol use disorder, and it targeted a different unhealthy pattern by decreasing their tendency to suppress their emotions.
This just illustrates the core findings so brilliantly. It's almost as if psilocybin has this innate intelligence, targeting whatever is needed most. In healthy people, it seems to just bolster an already healthy coping mechanism. But in clinical populations, it appears to work by dismantling the unhealthy, rigid patterns of thought and feeling that are causing all the distress in the first place. So, what does this all mean for the future of affective science, which is really just the scientific study of our emotions? While these findings are opening up entirely new ways of understanding mental health, We're moving beyond just managing symptoms to potentially changing the underlying emotional architecture of the brain itself.
Of course, this is really just the beginning, and there are still so many huge questions to answer. Scientists still need to better understand the role of so-called bad trips, the challenging experiences. They need to understand how emotional breakthroughs happen and pinpoint exactly how changes in the brain's wiring, its neuroplasticity, allow for these amazing long-term emotional shifts.
So if there's one crucial takeaway, it's this. It all seems to come down to emotional flexibility. Psychedelics may work by disrupting those rigid, unhealthy patterns and helping our brains become more adaptable and more responsive. They might not just be changing what we feel, but fundamentally changing how we relate to our feelings.
And that leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. As we keep unraveling this incredibly complex emotional puzzle, you really have to ask, are we on the verge of a revolution? Could a fundamentally new understanding of emotion, powered by this research, be the very key that unlocks the future of mental health care? It's a future that, honestly, is looking more hopeful than ever.